Llegó la hora de ponerte las pilas y prepararte para las fiestas en The Home Depot. Porque al comprar una herramienta Ryobi seleccionada, te llevas gratis una batería extra Ryobi One Plus. Sí, una batería extra gratis para que le saquen jugo a un regalo útil y duradero. Visita una tienda o recibe entrega gratis en más de 2 millones de productos elegibles por Internet. Ponte las pilas y haz que las fiestas sean mágicas con los regalos de The Home Depot. Haces más, logras más.
UFOs, psychic powers, chemtrails. To learn about mysterious events, you listen to the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know podcast. And here's where it gets crazy. Now you can read all about your favorite conspiracy theories in the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know book from the creators of the podcast. Dive into a smart, witty explanation of the unexplainable, packed with amazing illustrations. Available now. Order today at stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com or wherever you buy your books.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Hello, you beautiful podcast humans. We are here. We are doing it. This is 500 episodes, which is insane for me to say. But I am really proud of that fact. I actually wasn't even going to do anything for this 500th episode in regards to making mention of it and, maybe bringing on a special guest or whatever the case may be. But my son was like, hey, 500 episodes, that's a lot. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, it is. Because in my head, had been marking off the sort of 52-week increments as being a year. And then I was like, 500, that seems like such a big number. And it is, because I've been doing this podcast for, it's been close to 10 years. And it has irrevocably changed my life. I'm going to pontificate more in a moment. But I have to tell you, the guest today is Milo Auckerman from the Descendents. I am so thrilled to say those words in a sentence because Milo and Descendents are huge, obviously, within the punk rock hardcore community. They are a starter kit band. When you start to get into this awesome world that we are all heavily influenced by, they're probably top 10 bands that get introduced to people, hopefully, as long as you're doing it right. And the Descendents were huge for me. I will never forget hearing them in Pump Up the Volume, which we actually go to in great depth because I was so transfixed by how they got into this random movie with Christian Slater. It's a great movie, by the way. If you've never seen it, you can find it on YouTube. It's for free. But I got to take Milo down, stroll down memory lane, but then also focus on why Descendants still exist. And frankly, probably the most pressing and important question is how much coffee you should drink in a day. Because anybody that has paid attention to Descendants knows that coffee is a huge part of who it is that they are and what it is that they do. So I have to give a special shout out to my friend Carl, who is a previous guest on the show, for linking this up and for everybody that is listening to this thing, because I just really genuinely appreciate all of the interest and support, because this podcast has literally changed my life. And I know that sounds like a gross overstatement, but I've been able to make friendships. I've been able to travel with this particular show. There's so many doors have opened up to me because I've decided to talk into a microphone and interview people about their experiences within punk and hardcore and independent music. So I'm just incredibly thankful. And I love that. And I appreciate all of you that engage with this show on a week-to-week basis, or if you're just discovering it, I don't care. Welcome along for the ride. I really appreciate that. But anyways, I also want to highlight, gotta give a shout out to a few things. First of all, you can email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. I respond to all email there, and I always like to have a dialogue with people. So yeah, if you just want to say what's up, or if you want to say, hey, maybe you should have this person on. I've definitely connected the dots with people who've emailed me ideas and then been like, oh yes, that makes a lot of sense. You can also leave a rating and review on either Apple Podcasts or leave a rating on Spotify. Those things help, and I know that every podcast in the world asks you to do those things, but maybe for the 500th episode, you can throw me a bone there. And also, there is an incredible documentary. I can wholeheartedly endorse this because I've watched it and I think it's really, really good. Removing the fact that I did an interview for the documentary, but Dead Guy put out a documentary about their band. It's on fourthmedia.com. And actually not fourthmedia.com. It's fourth.media. That is the place, or you can just Google Dead Guy documentary. You'll be able to find it. But it's available for right now. It's an incredible piece of work. And I think that everybody that captures the essence of that band, they did not, no stone was left unturned. And I really, really think that that documentary is well worth your time. So anyways, all that out of the way, let's talk to Milo from the Descendents. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Here,
went to Descendents as a 41-year-old punk and hardcore kid from Southern California. Was a little bit peculiar because I got into you guys via the film Pump Up the Volume and your song in it. And I presume you're familiar with that film?
Yeah. I think I might have watched it, but really, I mean, I was definitely pointed towards it because people said, "Oh, they've got Wiener Schnitzel in there," so.
Totally. And that hit me at a young age where the intersection of music and comedy was at its height, as a 11 or 12-year-old. And then I dove into Sommary and then it was all over for me. Yeah. In hearing stories like that, and like you said, other people that have pointed you in that direction, is it interesting for you to kind of hear about how people got into your band?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's a lot of times it is more circuitous. And I mean, I think that's just because, we never got played on the radio, at least, especially back then. And so I think if you don't get that radio play, then it's got to be some kind of a word of mouth thing, or it's got to be some, like you said, some tangential way of doing it via this like snippet of a movie or something like that. So it is fun to hear how people did it. Oh, this person made me a tape, or I saw the thing in Pump Up the Volume, or that kind of thing. So it's unusual that there's these other ways that people find us besides the typical, rock channels of hearing them on the radio, which never really happened for us, but that's okay because there's plenty of other channels.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that definitely fits into the idea of existing in DIY punk and hardcore, where you don't necessarily know how you're going to reach the people, but then at the same time, like, they do end up finding you at some juncture, as long as you're doing it right.
And sometimes people would find us through other bands being played on the radio. So they hear some band on the radio, and then that band references us. So then that's kind of an indirect way. So yeah, we'll take whatever we can get at this point. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You're just going to open the door and be like, "Hey, come on in. I don't care how you got here. Welcome."
Yeah, exactly.
And as a follow-up to that one particular thing, do you even recall or recognize where that came up? Was it just one of those things like you got tapped on your door and was like, "Oh, hey, like, we want to play you guys in this movie," or did you just find out about it afterwards?
I found out about it afterwards because I think, Bill, he's kind of the business guy. And so I'm sure that someone contacted him, "Hey, we want to do this." Or maybe not, because, it was such a short song that I don't know this for a fact, but it could be that it fell under the samples. Legally, it's a sample. And if something's a sample, it's treated differently in those settings. So at any rate, no, it was not something that I was aware was being included. Bill may have known at the time, but I did hear about it after the fact and was, so I had to race out and, either, I don't think I saw it in the theaters, but I think someone had a tape of it or something like that. Just so
right.
I could see what was going on. But I guess they played it a few times, like back to back, like what's his name? Christian
Slater. Yeah.
He played it and he's like, "Whoa, that was great. Let's do it again." And he plays it again. So that was kind of fun. He looked like he was having a lot of fun with it. So that's cool.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what made it so interesting. I mean, honestly, it's like that film is so prescient in a lot of different ways in regards to the way that radio evolved into podcasting and all these other things. But to your point of just the idea that, hey, this guy looks like he's having fun with this music, like, I have to find out more about it. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of, putting the focal point on you as an individual, I know from a biographical perspective, I know you were born in Lomita but your more formative years were in the South Bay. What was kind of the family structure?
I was born in UCLA, Los Angeles.
Okay.
Grew up in Manhattan Beach. Moved to. The band was practicing in Lomita. That's where the Lomita part comes in.
Got it. Okay.
Is that we eventually started practicing in Lomita, and that was a pretty long-standing stint that we had practicing in Lomita. But Bill's from Redondo. I was from Manhattan. Frank was from Hermosa, and then Tony was from Long Beach or Lakewood / Long Beach. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those, but we all obviously convened into one area. So.
Right in the South Bay. Okay, cool. I appreciate the delineation there because you don't want to give short shrift to Los Angeles, the birthplace of Milo Auckerman. Yeah. But what was your family structure like as you were growing up? Like mom and dad in the house, brothers and sisters. What was the composite there?
I had 3 brothers, 2 older, 1 younger, and my parents. It was a great situation to grow up in because they just kind of let me, they gave me a lot of free reign to kind of explore and do whatever I wanted to do. And I, they trusted that I wasn't going to become a junkie or whatever. And because I got into punk rock and they were like, oh, okay, let's see where this goes, Right. And I even, I think they knew that I was college bound. Just based upon how I did in school and my interests. But when I actually went to a community college my first year. And I think that was the first time where they were like, wait a minute, this punk rock thing's meaning that you're not going to go to college right away. And I was like, don't worry, I got a plan. So, there was a lot of mutual trust going on. I think they trusted me to know what my plan was. And, the next year then I did go off to like a 4-year college. And so I just think my point is just that they really nurtured independence in me, which was good. And they weren't really very strict. And so, I'm that way with my kids. It's just like, I don't crash down on them, but, they know that I have high kind of expectations for them too, as well.
Yeah. That's a cool experience for you because I know, this was something I was going to pull on a little bit later, but I can imagine that many parents' reactions, and I'm sure you saw this with some of your friends, like as you start to get into this weirdo subculture where you're bringing home crazy hairstyles, not you personally, but other people and all these things that parents do not understand. And they're just going to be fearful of you engaging in this thing and then, become restrictive. But that wasn't your experience.
No. And actually I played when we recorded Milo Goes to College, and I played some of it for my dad, and he heard Parents, the song, which I didn't write. That was Frank's writing. But of course, my dad's hearing it and thinking that I wrote it. And so I'm thinking, oh man, now he's going to be like bummed. And he got to the end, is like, well, I could tell he was bummed, but he just said, man, that song's kind of boring or something. Like he was critical of the song, but he couldn't come out and say like, why are you harshing on me, man? So
Totally. Yeah, I can. It is funny when you have to, in some respects, like share your art or share what it is you're doing with your parents. And then, you're just like, oh, they're not gonna have any idea where I'm coming from. Like, I promise you don't suck, Dad, but it's just general.
Well, it was definitely the title of the song is Parents. And it's like, why, shut up. So I think I could see the gears grinding in his head. And then the first response was like, man, your melody is really boring on that, or something like that. That's perfect. Like, I was kind of relieved. I was like, oh, okay, that's his criticism of it. So,
Yeah, it's better than go to your room and don't sing about parents ever again.
Yeah. I disown you. I disown you as a son.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And so you being kind of in the middle of your your siblings, was it one of those things that, do you feel like your older siblings reflected on you like, oh, Milo, you have it so much easier because our parents were more strict on us, or was that just kind of like the way they handled all of you?
Well, there was a bit of a dynamic, and that the reason why there was a dynamic that existed because my 2 older brothers are my half brothers from my mom's previous marriage, And so they always did feel that they got kind of a not a fair shake from their stepfather, who, you know, had preference for his younger biological kids. So there's definitely there's definitely an elephant in the room there, where the older two kids did feel that.
Right.
But you know, as a kid, you can't do anything about that as a kid. And then as an adult, you're kind of like, oh, that ought to be water under the bridge, or there's nothing we can do about that now, you know.
Yeah.
Bygones be bygones. But you know, I think we never had a lot of rancor as a kid, but as adults, there's some looking back and be like, yeah, this didn't go exactly as planned, basically. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I mean, since you were located in that particular area, did you, I guess, enjoy the South Bay and kind of all that it offered, or did it feel that general suburban malaise that I know a lot of kids feel getting raised wherever they're coming up?
Yeah, I was kind of in high school, kind of a shy kid, kind of a wallflower, and you know, growing up in that area, that can be really exacerbated by if you don't kind of partake in all the typical South Bay, you know, teen, like cool guy activities like surfing and hanging out at the beach. And I definitely didn't have a lot of time for just kind of like the hang at the beach hang. When I would go down to the beach, I wouldn't even wear a bathing suit. I would just kind of go down, because I was working in high school. I did some work as a senior, and I would just wear my work clothes down to the beach and just kind of, you know, hang on the beach that way. And yeah, I wasn't surfing at the time. I had a very brief period of surfing. But yeah, I never really fit into that whole Southern California surf culture. And no one in the band really did. You know, Bill and Frank, they were more fisherman type. So, you know, that's something you can definitely do in the South Bay, but it's not none of the cool people are going to be out fishing. They're going to be out surfing. So we never really, we always kind of like, you know, we were always kind of like square pegs in the round holes kind of people.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, especially too with that, how that culture was becoming so, popular from the underground perspective. You mean now where it's, you know, mainstream culture, but you truly felt like if you weren't doing that, then what other choice was there but to, you know, try to like go golfing or whatever? Like there's no other option.
Yeah. No, it's funny because we never really fit in, we were drawn to each other. And so, and then by being drawn to each other and having a mutual love of punk rock, you know, that's how that relationship kind of blossomed. Like Bill and I both felt like outcasts, and we both loved the Germs. So, you know, we should just be in a band together. You know, that's the way that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you've spoken about, you know, how influential AM radio and K-Rock was to you getting into music, and more specifically independent music. Was it just kind of the natural, I guess, dissonance of like how different styles of that music really kind of penetrated to you, or what attracted you to that stuff that was a little bit left of center?
Well, I got into punk through new wave, and specifically probably Devo. And so I think listening to Devo, I felt like a kinship with them on the kind of nerd level, because I was a total nerd. And so then, I think moving from punk moving from new wave into punk, I saw the same kind of outcast kind of thing. You know, you can be a nerd and listen to Devo. So you found your people, but in punk you could find your people too. And the nice thing about punk is that you could be anything you wanted to be. That was the beauty of punk at that point. In LA, especially, this is prior to the skinheads taking it over. But at least in the Hollywood punk scene, there were so many different bands of so many different flavors, and so you could be whoever you wanted to be. And I always felt that was one of the great things about punk rock. So that was one attraction. But coming from new wave, and finding myself kind of more and more gravitating and more attracted to just harder, faster music. And you know, Devo was the kind of gateway. But the Devo show that I went to in 1980, X opened up, and then that was kind of where I jumped over. You know, I was listening to new wave, but then when I first I heard X, and then okay, well now I'm gonna listen to punk, and heard X, and I heard the Germs, and I heard Black Flag, and it was all over. I was just gonna make the switch. So yeah, for me, it was like a kind of a continuum or a progression to wanting to listen to faster and louder and harder music. And that was what did it for me. But if you layer on top of that, the fact that I was moving from one kind of outcast or one kind of, rebellious thing to a different rebellious thing, kind of that layers on top of it.
Thank you very much to the fine people at rockabilia.com for supporting this podcast for as long as they have. They are the finest purveyors of band merch on the internet, bar none. You can use this promo code 100 words or less. It gets you 10% off your order. Do that and you will receive that offer. Plus, you'll receive a bunch of officially licensed band merch from every band you could possibly imagine. No joke, I know that sounds like maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but they have everything you could possibly want. Go onto the website, interact with it, have fun, order, use the promo code 100 words or less. You get 10% off your order. They ship it lickety-split to you. You're supporting an independent company. Bands are getting paid from this. It is such a virtuistic cycle. That's not even a word, but you get what I'm saying. Virtuous cycle. There we go. Please support them, support independent music, support bands, because merch is so important. I can't stress that enough. But anyways, thank you to the good people of Rockabilia. And again, promo code 100 words or less, 10% off your order. Let's go.
You ever heard of the Man in the Mask?
What are you?
A friend.
Who wanders the street every Halloween searching for someone small and defenseless.
There are things in the night that would love to get their bony hands on a boy like you.
He'll try to convince you that he's harmless.
I could help you.
He'll tell you that he's your friend.
I am not going to hurt you.
But if you see him once,
You're not who you say you are.
you're guaranteed to see him again.
Why are you following me?
And again.
Stay away from me.
And again.
Wait! Help! Help!
13 Days of Halloween, Devil's Night. Season 3 of the horror fiction podcast presented in immersive 3D audio. Starring Carter Rockwood.
I don't know you, mister. I don't want to know you.
And Clancy Brown.
Lots of dangerous things have been let loose tonight. I am not the only one.
Listen to 13 Days of Halloween on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if I told you a sports story where what happens on the field is the least interesting part of the tale?
But I think there's a long tradition of these kind of stories, especially these kinds of sports stories. Have the license to follow it all the way down to the bottom.
This is The Cost of These Dreams, a podcast about sports stories from Wright Thompson. There's a story about a professional golfer who's chasing one dream just to fill the hole left by another.
If the person is that visible and yet they don't feel seen, what's going on?
You'll hear a story about a college football team that's really about the legacy of the Civil War.
We do it to them and they do it to themselves without really understanding exactly what it is they're doing.
And a grumpy old man who got everything he ever wanted at too young an age.
The best stories are universal. They should be about everybody.
Listen to The Cost of These Dreams on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Bob Pittman, Chairman and CEO of iHeartMedia. On the new season of my podcast, Math and Magic, I sit down with the trailblazers on the frontiers of marketing to hear how they've used data and creativity to bring new ideas to life. We'll hear from Steve Cooper, CEO of Warner Music Group.
What the internet has done is democratize access, but what you can't democratize is talent.
Susie Deering, CMO of Ford Motor Company.
We are at that moment when it all changes. And I think that a big part of why we're at that moment is because of the F-150 Lightning. It changed everything.
And Jeff Bewkes, the last CEO of Time Warner and former CEO of HBO.
We didn't make shows for the advertisers. We made shows for the audience. And so that's what we were saying with our campaign. It's not TV, it's HBO.
Listen to the new season of Math and Magic on our own iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you can track the way that you were entering the music space by being like, okay, I like this and I'm not going to let this go, but I want something a little bit more, whether that's, aggressive, poppy, whatever. And yeah, you follow that path.
Yeah. And you end up identifying with certain music based upon either lyrics, well, obviously the sounds, but also the lyrics. And in the case of Devo, it was the sounds, the lyrics, and the fact that these guys were total dorks. And I thought, yeah, that's for me. That's how I ended up with that. Yeah.
Right. And I would be, remiss if I did not mention, I know Rodney and the Rock was such a huge portal for you in introducing you to all these styles of music. And I just think that people that don't live in Southern California and don't have a really cool radio station that curates that stuff it's such a portal.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I started listening to, or when I first saw X play opening for Devo, I had no idea who the hell they were, but I had heard from someone, oh yeah, that band gets played on Rodney's show all the time. I go, Rodney, who's that? Who's Rodney? So then I became a Rodney fanatic, and he was playing all the old X music, the Danger House stuff before they put out the record Los Angeles. And yeah, man, I listened all the time to Rodney, and that's the first place I heard the Germs and all these great bands I'd never heard before. So I became kind of a Rodney aficionado. And then I started taping it. And then I got this gig playing the tapes at school during lunch and during recess, just over the PA. So I was being a DJ, just playing. I was kind of rehashing Rodney as a DJ at our local high school, which was great fun too.
That's so incredible to be given the reins to that and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna pretty much rip off what Rodney's doing because none of the kids here know that, so I'm cool.
Yeah, no, it's like I had I could have spun whatever, I could have played whatever, but it's like no, the only music I want to play right now is whatever Rodney plays. That's it. So I just yeah.
I love it. School and education in general, just from an outsider's perspective, seemed important to you, just because you continued on and obviously got degrees, and you're a professional human being from a paper/diploma perspective. Was that always kind of important to you and hardwired in you, or was that just something where it's like, well, I like school, so I'm going to continue along with it?
Well, I think, like, going back to my parents, I kind of feel like they were definitely they had that underlying kind of expectation, and I wasn't necessarily, I didn't really have a drive to do anything specifically after high school, except that I had at one point I had to give an oral presentation in high school about some issue of biology in my biology class, and I did it on DNA. And then I hit upon, DNA is cool. And that's when I decided, if I'm going to go do something after high school, it may as well just be something about DNA. Cause at that point I figured, well, I'll go be a student. I'll go to college and study biology, and specifically DNA. It was the thing. So yeah, I think it was something that kind of took off at the same time for me that music took off in terms of my interest in it. And the two things kind of went in parallel. Like, yeah, punk rock is my be all end all, but so is DNA. Of all things, DNA is the thing. And so that's how that got going. But it was definitely something that it took me. I mean, it was something that kicked in maybe senior year of high school. Prior to that, I had no clue. I figured, well, maybe I need to go to college, but I don't know what it's going to be. But then once I'd honed in on what I wanted to do, it kind of became that much easier just to kind of, make the long-term commitment to it.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's cool that you were able to balance both of those things in your head, because I know that especially at that time when punk was emerging, it was so nihilistic and, live fast, die young scenario. Just that idea of like, oh, education is important. Like, clearly those two things did not match up. So you were able to navigate that for yourself.
Yeah. I think, we've never really, never dressed the part, never dressed the punk part, never really ascribed to any of that kind of like take drugs or whatever. And so when I told Bill that I was, hey, I'm going to go to college, he was like, cool, thumbs up to you. I think he he fully grasped that A, it was something important to me, but B, you know, it just was such a natural kind of progression for me. And he saw that as that way, because the way I was with the band was I was the most anti-punk, anti-rock frontman that you could ever imagine. So yeah, of course I'm going to go do something, you know, very anti-punk or very, very kind of nerdy. That's just part of my DNA at that point. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, you were just like, if I were to do this, that would be like punk against myself, and that doesn't even make sense, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot is made about the Los Angeles punk scene in regards to being incredibly violent, and like you mentioned previously with skinheads. I'm guessing that you were seeing a lot of that, and I know that some of that was directed into the fact that clearly Descendents never had a vibe of any threatening aura. Do you think that all that was kind of combined into the fact that you guys had no, not a mean bone in your body in regards to that?
I think it really just reflects that the music, when we were getting into this stuff, it was all about the music, and there was just zero about anything else. So you get into a band, you go see them play live, and what are you going to do? Show up with chains and like try to beat you up? No, you're going to go sit at the front of the stage and absorb, the magic on stage, absorb this band that you love. And so I went to a lot of shows where I would just plant myself at the front of the stage, be watching the band, and all kinds of mayhem and violence is happening around behind me. Of course, these days you just call that legitimate political discourse, but it was definitely something that was happening behind me that was violent, and I would just ignore it and just kind of go and just kind of listen to the band. So it was something that wasn't really. It was something that happened for me. It was subsidiary, and I think people who got into punk just to beat people up, they're not really useful punk fans to me.
Right. Yeah, it's like they could have appended themselves to anything that could inspire them to, or be bullies in a different circumstance. So yeah, you're very right.
Yeah.
I know, like you were mentioning, you've been open about your lack of confidence and, wallflower nature, and use the band to be able to help you kind of, grow up and interact with people more freely. Did you feel that confidence bleeding over to other aspects of your life? Like once the band started to, play out and play some shows, did you feel a little bit more, I guess, comfortable in your own skin as you existed in other more quote unquote normal circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think once I'd gotten a few shows under my belt, you learn to kind of revel in the moment and not be distracted by your own shyness or your own nervousness. And of course, you can use that nervousness to your own benefit. So the first couple shows, I was kind of staring at the ground, not even facing the audience. But then I learned how to just use the nervousness to my advantage and kind of act out on part of nervousness, of course, is just being jittery. And we would drink a bunch of coffee, and I just use all that jitteriness on stage to kind of amp out a little bit and go crazy. And that was how I kind of got past that part of it. And then part of it is also like, if you're worried about what people think about you, then you're just going to stare at the ground. But if you don't give a fuck when anyone thinks, then you're just going to use that nervousness for good. You're going to be using it for making a great show and just having fun, basically. And that's kind of what I did is I got past that, maybe in the first few shows. And then, we when you play throughout the States, you kind of learn to, if there's a lot of people in the audience, then I learned if you've got a lot of people in the audience, then you may as well just make a big party out of it and just kind of, that's where it's kind of a little celebration. If there's not that many people in the audience, then you just kind of make a party out of it with the people on stage. And we would just kind of, make a great show. And so I think regardless, we just wanted to kind of make a good show. And that was the extent of it. So yeah, I got over it pretty quick, I think.
Right. Yeah. And especially too with, I think that idea of, because I think, I mean, most people that get attracted to subcultures, there is a implicit level of shyness that exists. But then the idea of once you find your peers and this secret society, you're comfortable around them. And then in some respects, that will also, once you're existing out in the real world, people will be able to, or you'll be able to exist amongst them a little bit more comfortable because you're like, yeah, I got this whole secret world over here you guys don't know about.
Yeah. And, and that's the thing is like when you play to a fairly empty room, you could be all glum about the fact that no one came to your show, or you can try to make the drummer laugh, and so,
right.
So, or perform for the drummer, and so we would do a lot of that where we're just kind of performing for each other. And, that made it all worthwhile too. So even if no one appreciated it out in the audience, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Totally. You're like, yeah, this is kind of like practice for us, practice/comedy routine. So we're here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you started to put out records and become, for lack of a better term, a more quote unquote serious band as far as, touring and all that stuff was concerned. When did you kind of notice that people were paying attention, whether it was the fact that, you guys were able to get on larger shows within the greater Southern California area, or was it, when you started to release full lengths? And like, I know it, like crystallizing it into one moment is difficult, but, were there moments in your head where it's like, wow, like people are actually paying attention to what we were doing?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of, I don't think it happened at any one show, but the audiences grew bigger and bigger. Now we toured the U.S. several times, and the first time you go out, you do with a lot of kind of empty rooms, and but I guess the thing is even on that first tour, we would play a place like New York, the bigger cities. You'd play a place in New York, and people would show up, and then it would be like, okay, that made up for the fact that nobody showed up in Nebraska or whatever, or nobody showed up in Oklahoma, but people did show up in New York. And so, I think it definitely, it was kind of I don't think it was any one particular moment where it was like, oh, we've made it or whatever, anything like that. But And then more recently, I'd say in this century, 2011, probably the crystallizing moment when we came back in 2011 was the very first show we played back. We played at the Fun Fest in Texas. And it was like, we strike that first chord and there's thousands of people out there. And then you kind of go, wow, it was like, it really brought home that we could still do it and that people still cared, people still wanted to see us. And so, yeah, that was kind of maybe a crystallizing moment for me. Like, because we hadn't played in 2011, we hadn't played before that in like 8 years or so, to come back and not to know whether anyone even cared about us anymore. But then to kind of, have that kind of response was just kind of mind blowing. It pretty much jump started I would say the kind of permanent resurrection of the band to this day, where we're just like, well, why take any more time off from this thing? Because it's all good. It's just been one good time after another. So we'll just keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, I mean, because I've definitely seen you in different iterations as far as, I mean, I think the first time I saw you was in San Bernardino with like Guttermouth and Strife, and I want to say Voodoo Glow Skulls, but I mean, that was a very large show. I mean, I was like, 1,000+ people, but it did feel different when you guys, quote unquote, came back and, like you said, resurrected, where it's like, I saw you at one of the Riot Fests in Chicago or whatever, but the palpable energy and I think frankly appreciation that people had, where it was like, oh wow, like this can be a regular part of my life now, as opposed to like maybe I would have been able to see obviously a documentary from you guys at one point, and that was kind of it.
I think we've come and we've gone, we've been away for a while and we've come back, and every time we come back that's always been the thing of whether it's going to still resonate, but it still does. And so it's been real gratifying. It's been one of the surprises of my life that I can just keep coming back to this. It's like an endless font of of just good vibes. So, for the time being, we're not going to, there's no point in like setting it aside anymore. I've done plenty of that in my life of just kind of like trying to shelve music. And now it's like, no, we're just going to do this all the time.
It's like, hey, Milo, pay attention to us over here. Right.
Yeah. And of course, pandemic really solidified that too, because the pandemic meant that I couldn't do it anymore. And we were withering on the vine again. It was like, oh no, Yeah. And so I think, I think a lot of bands came back from the pandemic probably with a lot more appreciation for just playing live. Like, yeah, we got to go play live now because it's been such a lean couple years of just not even getting to interact with all of the people, So
yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point as well, where you guys, in my opinion, the aging gracefully within the context of punk and hardcore, like that's difficult because the person you were when you were 16 years old and writing songs is much different as a 20, 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old. And I think the fine line that you guys have walked on where it's like, yes, we're still just a bunch of silly nerds playing in a punk band, but not singing about the exact same things. I'm sure that's a very deliberate and conscious thought that you have where it's like, yes, we can still make fart jokes, but like they're a little bit more elevated than they were in the past.
Yeah. I mean, I think the subject, we can only write about our lives. And so I think as our lives as our lives change and, we start to age, then I think that the subject matter is going to be reflective of that. But having said that, I still like to bash out the same 4 chords, and I still, I haven't written a fart song recently, but I'm sure there's one in my future.
Sure, yeah, you're like I'm not closing that opportunity out, but just because I think it does. It becomes one of those things where you don't want to, be this like cliche on top of a cliche of yourself where it's like, oh, I'm mimicking my 20-year-old self, where it's like, well, I'm not exactly that same person, but yeah. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain subject matters that just have to change. Like I can't be writing about dating a 16-year-old girl anymore. That's not going to go over so well. But I can still write about farting because everyone likes to fart. I'll probably be on my deathbed and I'll probably fart and laugh. So that just goes to show you, the fart song will never go away from our repertoire, no doubt.
No, for sure, it's timeless. Yeah, that is the legacy that will be etched on your tombstone.
Yep.
maybe, fingers crossed.
Shout out to the boys and girls over at the Pure Noise Records compound because they are releasing Terror's 8th full length. Unbelievable, right? The record is called Pain into Power, and go to purenoise.net. First and foremost, you'll be able to see all of the awesome vinyl packaging and pre-orders that they have going on there. But let's be honest, if you have not listened to Terror, you were completely missing out. But what makes this record very, very unique and special is because they teamed up with their founding guitarist, Todd Jones, who plays in Nails, also played in Carry On. I could go even deeper, but I'm not going to do that. But he also produced the record, and it's really, really exceptional. So let's listen to a song called Boundless Contempt. We'll just a little sample of it, and then hold on for some more details. There we go. Just, you want to circle pit, you want to mosh, you want to do all of it. But like I said, Terror's new record comes out on May 6th on Pure Noise Records. It's called Pain into Power. Visit purenoise.net. They have a bunch of sweet guest spots from Madison from Year the Knife, Crystal Park from Initiate, and Cannibal Corpse's George Corpse Grinder Fisher. I mean, it's great. So go to purenoise.net, find out more information, pre-order it, pre-save it, do what you need to.
You ever heard of the Man in the Mask?
What are you?
A friend.
Who wanders the street every Halloween searching for someone small and defenseless.
There are things in the night that would love to get their bony hands on a boy like you.
He'll try to convince you that he's harmless.
I could help you.
He'll tell you that he's your friend.
I am not going to hurt you.
But if you see him once,
You're not who you say you are.
you're guaranteed to see him again.
Why are you following me?
And again.
Stay away from me.
And again.
Wait! Help! Help!
13 Days of Halloween, Devil's Night, Season 3 of the horror fiction podcast presented in immersive 3D audio, starring Carter Rockwood.
I don't know you, mister. I don't want to know you.
And Clancy Brown.
Lots of dangerous things have been let loose tonight. I am not the only one.
Listen to 13 Days of Halloween on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if I told you a sports story where what happens on the field is the least interesting part of the tale?
But I think there's a long tradition of these kind of stories, especially these kinds of sports stories, have the license to follow it all the way down to the bottom.
This is The Cost of These Dreams, a podcast about sports stories from Wright Thompson. There's a story about a professional golfer who's chasing one dream just to fill the hole left by another.
If the person is that visible and yet they don't feel seen, what's going on?
You'll hear a story about a college football team that's really about the legacy of the Civil War.
We do it to them and they do it to themselves without really understanding exactly what it is they're doing.
And a grumpy old man who got everything he ever wanted at too young an age.
The best stories are universal. They should be about everybody.
Listen to The Cost of These Dreams on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Bob Pittman, Chairman and CEO of iHeartMedia. On the new season of my podcast, Math and Magic, I sit down with the trailblazers on the frontiers of marketing to hear how they've used data and creativity to bring new ideas to life. We'll hear from Steve Cooper, CEO of Warner Music Group.
What the internet has done is democratize access, but what you can't democratize is talent.
Susie Deering, CMO of Ford Motor Company.
We are at that moment when it all changes. And I think that a big part of why we're at that moment is because of the F-150 Lightning. It changed everything.
And Jeff Bewkes, the last CEO of Time Warner and former CEO of HBO.
We didn't make shows for the advertisers. We made shows for the audience. And so that's what we were saying with our campaign. It's not TV, it's HBO.
Listen to the new season of Math and Magic on our own iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Like you said, your parents were very permissive in regards to you exploring all of these interesting opportunities and touring and being active with the band. When they started to interact with you, like seeing you play live and then seeing you being able to attract crowds and everything, do you think was there a sense of pride attached to it, or was there just kind of like, well, as long as Milo's safe, like that's all we really care about?
I think for my mom, there was definitely a sense of pride. My dad, he was so coming from a different world musically. I mean, he's full on classical music guy. Really had no use for anything that was rock and roll. It was classical only for him. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of like, yeah, cool, whatever. But my mom, she would definitely, she would come to some of the shows. She's too old now to come to any shows, but she even as a 70 or 80-year-old, she had been to some shows. And yeah, she does the thing of like meeting someone, like she'll see someone in the street with a mohawk and be like, you know what, my son, and doing that whole thing, like, my son's in this band, and I'm just like, Mom, so she definitely, she's proud of it. And that's nice for me to hear, even though it can be embarrassing, obviously, but, no, it's been good. I mean, she's, I think she sees it as something that I kind of, I did as a hobby, but that I applied myself successfully to it as a hobby. And so I was able to kind of, place it in the right context. I mean, I think if I would have gone all in at age 17, she might've been like, is this, cause like I said, I went to this community college for a year and she was like, what are you doing? I think she definitely had designs on me being like like an academic, not so much on me being a punk rocker, but in the aftermath, I think she could see that both things were legitimate endeavors for sure.
That's really cool. I like how you articulated the 11, the trajectory that they saw was valid on both paths as opposed to, like, yes, here's your professional life and then here's this dumb band life. Like, as long as it takes up 5% of your time, then we're okay with it. That's cool.
No, I think my mom especially, she saw it as a creative outlet. That's the thing is that regardless of what they say about punk rock, oh, it's this dirty, whatever drug laden thing. She saw the creative outlet that it could be for me. And so, and I think she had to kind of give it the its due respect as being a creative outlet. And that was something where she could tip her hat to me in terms of that. Like, yeah, you've got a nice creative outlet here. So yeah, that worked out.
Yeah. The stamp of approval. Yeah. That makes sense. When business started to, become more of a part of the band's life, and I use maybe the word business in air quotes because, once you started getting paid, like, oh, wow, we got paid $300 for a show. That's like business, even though you're not articulating it as such.
Yeah.
And like you said, Bill was the primary driver behind that, but how did you personally interact with the business of music? Was it one of those things that you wanted to keep it far away from you just because you liked your role within the band, or how did that kind of ping pong around your head?
Well, I feel like maybe I probably didn't do as much as I could have business wise. I left it all up to Bill, and looking back, he definitely had more. He just had more kind of zest for that part of it than I did, and so I just kind of let him take care of it. But I think also what that means is that he also had to deal with a lot of during the downturns, try to who's going to get paid and who's not. But yeah, I think it was. I don't really know if I have a good sense for business. It's not something that really reason. In order to have a good sense for something, in order to have a good business sense, you have to care, and I just don't care.
Right.
Of course I care. I care about making a living doing music at this point. I probably back in the 80s, I didn't care about making a living doing music. And in the 90s, barely cared about making a living doing music. But, in my later years, it's like, yeah, I want to make a living doing this. And so then I do have some involvement in all that. But yeah, I think, I guess I feel a little bit bad about saddling Bill with all of it because it makes him the kind of like focal point of all the punk purists who might think, oh, you guys are sellouts or whatever, but we're not sellouts. We just want to make a living doing it. We're not looking to get rich. We just want to, do what we love and not have to kind of work at Kinko's in addition to that, and so
right.
But I think that he probably had to take the brunt of that because I was off just doing my own thing. I was doing science or whatever. And occasionally I roll in and we'd play some shows. And, I've never been a person who relied on music to make money. And, it just so happens that now I can make a living doing it. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know does that mean that I'm more of a pure musician? I don't know. It's these are all philosophical questions I don't have a good answer for because I know that now, especially post pandemic, I feel very strongly that people ought to be able to make money playing music.
No, absolutely. And I think the concept of selling out now is not even. Yeah, it's not even part of the vernacular that people use. Like selling out as being like, oh, if Descendents put out their next record and it sounded like, you guys were rapping or, doing something that was more quote unquote modern, like that's a sellout move, but nothing else. Yeah, I completely agree.
No, but it's funny. But the thing is I think I've evolved through the years to be much more kind of like, this is a musician's right. But back in the 80s, I felt like, I was like, no, we shouldn't be making t-shirts. I actually was like, no t-shirts. So I was being kind of a dick about it, back then. And I think Bill, he had more of a vision. He was the visionary, and it's like, no, we can sell this. Like we sold like bonus cups. And I look back now and think, oh, that was genius. But at the time I was like, oh, we're just capitalizing on, our music to sell a product. I was just being a dick. So
right.
Back now and realize that.
Well, but I mean, maybe I'm giving you a pass here, but like that was clearly a time and place in which bands had to be way more considerate about that because there were all these other implications that existed. Because it's like, oh yeah, like selling a $6 t-shirt, like, oh my God, we can't do that. And so it's like now, people, $20 t-shirts are common. It's not even a problem.
Yeah. Back then it was like the maximum rock and roll thing of like, they'd really harsh on you for doing that kind of stuff,
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. You'd have a target on your back if you put a barcode on the record, obviously. Yeah. And kind of, pivoting that into, like you were saying, the, pursuit of higher education and science. And that was always part of who you are and who you are now and who you were. And that brought you interacting with a lot of, civilians and people in Gen Pop, as I like to say, in a non-pejorative way. How did they react once they, got to know you a little bit and found out that it's like, what do you mean you sing in a band, Milo? Like, what the hell is this? Did they find it just like humorous, or it like hardly ever came up in the real world?
Well, I think it probably, it rarely came up, except that when I got my permanent job in science, which was at DuPont, and this would have been in the early 2000s.
Yep.
The guy that was all slated to hire me, I went to go give a job interview there, and he said, oh, I hear you playing this band. And I go, yeah, we're playing a show tomorrow night, actually. And he got this weird kind of look in his eye, like, oh, really? And the next thing I know, I go to the show the next day. It was actually an all show, but I was going to be on stage with all for a little bit.
Right.
And next thing I go to the show, and he's waiting in line to get into the show. This guy that was supposed to hire me. And so he sees me play the next night and then decides to hire me. So I feel like, I must have impressed him on stage, I guess, for him to hire me the next day. So yeah, there was definitely like a notion of like, wow, this guy does different kind of stuff. And I guess it made me that much more hireable. To him, it made me that much more interesting as a candidate for that job. And so it worked out well for me there in terms of that. So he was my best boss I ever had, because he saw me for who I was, which was, I was a scientist, but I was this guy who wanted to do things I wanted to do creative things, whether it be in science or whether it be in music. And he could see that maybe if he hired me in a science, that I could do some creative stuff. So I hope I didn't let him down. I don't know.
Yeah, I really like that idea of being able to combine the disciplines, because you are coming at it from two different angles of like, yes, I like science, but at the same time, I exist in this creative world where I do think that, people do tend to stick in their lanes, and then not like there's anything wrong with that. But then when you're not crossing these, interesting worlds, you might just have a typical reaction, which isn't bad, but it's not, the outside of the box, quote unquote, thinkers that people might be looking for.
Yeah. I mean, I think science requires obviously someone to be technical, but, believe it or not, you have to be creative in science too. And I think that was one thing that I felt like I could bring to the table is I could bring a certain element of creativity to the science. And that was something where probably gave short shrift to the technical side of it. I was maybe a little too creative and not technical enough in the end, but but also science requires you to have enthusiasm. And so I brought a lot of enthusiasm to science, and I brought a lot of creativity, and I'd say a modicum of technical prowess, and it helped me out in the long run. But yeah, I think it's something that I always talk about. People always think, well, these two things are so disparate from each other, but no, they share a fair amount of overlap in terms of the creative aspect of them. You have to be creative in both. And also the other aspect where science and music shares is that you have this notion of, in science, you're always trying to overturn the apple cart. You're trying to kind of change what the status quo is in terms of if there's some common fact out there, but there's evidence to support a different claim, then you can do the experiments to test that alternative hypothesis, and that becomes something where you're challenging the status quo, which is what we like to do in punk too. So.
Yeah. Oh no, you hit that nail right on the head, and I think that's like you said, that makes you more successful in both fields, because you cannot be just this atypical person in either or, and like that's what that's there. No, you have never been interviewed, and people have not brought up science. That's just and so it's there is this kind of interesting sort of ego worship that exists in being a singer of a band, not so much from the person that is the singer, but clearly a lot of people pay attention to the vocalist of most bands, especially within the rock world, as it were. And you have always been so self-deprecating, where you're just like, listen, I'm this idiot carrying around this water bottle with glasses. Like, come on, like I'm not cool in any respect. To where it doesn't, like any sort of ego worship doesn't stick on you. Was that kind of a defense mechanism from the get-go, where it's like, listen, I'm not cool, I'm doing this pretty much since the inception of the band? Or is that something you kind of had to like learn to put in because you didn't want people thinking of you in those terms?
No, it's just really a self-awareness, because I think about when you get down to the kind of like the nuts and bolts of who writes the music, who's the kind of ringleader, all that kind of stuff. That none of that's me. I write some percentage of the music. I write probably a quarter of the music, no more, no less. So I think it's basically stating the reality of the situation. I mean, of course, it'd be different if I was the sole songwriter, and then I could be like, yeah, well, I'm the dude, but I'm not the dude. I'm the one of four dudes, and that's. There's no, I feel like if I were to say anything other than that, then it doesn't reflect the reality of it. We've got four songwriters in this band, and we all write songs together. And I think that's just something that has to be, what I found is that you have to kind of reiterate that point quite a bit, because because you're right. People want to focus on the song, on the singer as being, oh, he must be writing all the songs. Yeah. And the thing is I am singing other people's lyrics. I'm singing Bill's lyrics. I'm singing Carl's lyrics. I don't sing too many of Stefan's lyrics because he doesn't write too many lyrics. But at any rate, that's something that people, they get wrong. But it's natural for them to get it wrong because I'm the voice of the band. So the voice must be the person who comes up with all the thoughts. But of course, that's not the way it works.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That composite nature, I think you said it well, of like, this is all of us. And I understand that the general public, is not going to maybe look at all the individuals in the same way that you look at, the person at center stage yelling into a microphone, but you yourself can feel more comfortable existing as this unit, as opposed to like, oh, well, of course, like everyone's going to pay attention to me because I'm the coolest.
Yeah. And the thing is I am proud of the fact that I'm able to interpret their words too, because I mean, I think there's a lot of maybe bands out there where it's like maybe the vocalist's like, I got to write all the lyrics, because I got to get behind him. But I can get behind lyrics from Bill, and I can get behind lyrics from Carl, just because we have that affinity for each other, where we kind of finish each other's sentences or whatever. We really see eye to eye on so many issues, and we really we have a shared experience. And so I have no problem singing their lyrics, because it's just like an extension of my personality to sing their lyrics. And I feel like that's been the case all along. When I joined the band, they already had a full set of songs before I'd even joined that had been written by me. So I got very proficient and very comfortable at singing other people's words and just kind of interpreting them and projecting them in my whatever voice I gave them.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. A few more things I want to pull on before I let you go. The the influence that Descendents have had in regards to punk and that whole subculture is pretty undeniable, and I'm not just saying that to gas you up, but especially coming from where you guys came from and the limited scope that you were focused on as you were beginning the band. So now that you have clearly more perspective on it now than you did, even 10 to 15 years ago when the band was in that, sort of hiatus stasis, is it one of those things, like, do you reflect on the legacy at all when people, put a question like this towards you? Or is it basically just like, I just kind of keep on keeping on because this is obviously still fun? Or are you reflective? Do you like to look back, I guess I should say?
I mean, the only way I'm reflective is out of pure gratitude, because I feel like none of this was planned. It was like, I'm going to leave the band in 82 and I'm going to leave the band in 86 or 87. And I'm going to, rejoin in 95 or 96 and then leave again in 90. So it just goes on and on.
Right.
So the fact that we're here in the here and now, and it's just like, you mean people still want to hear my band? So it's I'm very grateful, and that's all I can feel. I can't really pin down, the why it all works out that way. I think we've written some songs, I think, that have some lasting impressions on people. That's great, but I'm sure there's plenty of the bands out there who have written equally good songs that are not in our position. So I've been very grateful about all of it. And that's the only way I reflect on it. Any more reflection than that, then I probably would just get it all wrong, or it's just almost impossible for me to try to figure out the whys and the wherefores.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, plus that's not your job. That's other people's jobs.
Oh my, the good people at Louisville Vegan Jerky Co. are back. I am thrilled to say that this jerky is hands down the best jerky I've ever had in my life. That's even from a person who, I mean, I haven't eaten meat in 25 some odd years, but I remember I used to like beef jerky when I was 11 years old, and reflecting on that experience back then, and then having this vegan jerky now, it's like, dude, doesn't even hold a candle to it. So just Google the company. You'll be able to find them very easily. Louisville Vegan Jerky. You can follow them on all the socials, but they have so many amazing flavors. My personal favorite, the smoky barbecue. Oh, man, it is so good. But they have pepperoni, they got black pepper, they got buffalo dill, and plus they put out these really limited edition batches that they've been blowing my mind. They actually did a collab with the awesome band Man that it's like a chili thing. Oh my gosh, it's so good. But trust me, you can order this stuff and you will enjoy it. I got it from my parents. I got it from my dad, who's like a total carnivore and is like, oh man, vegan jerky, I don't even know about this. Gave it to him, loved it. So whether you're a vegan, vegetarian, or you just like good snacks in general, Louisville Vegan Jerky is the way to go. Go to their website, find out more, and order their starter pack. That's probably the best way to go. You get 3 flavors, and you'll be able to enjoy it all. So thank you, Louisville Vegan Jerky Co., for the best food and supporting this podcast.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code JERSEY and your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, player props, and daily boosted odds specials. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matter more than ever. Sign up today and find out why nothing beats a win at the King of Sportsbooks. Download the BetMGM app or go to BetMGM.com and enter code JERSEY and place your first wager risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. New customer offer. 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You ever heard of the Man in the Mask?
What are you?
A friend.
Who wanders the street every Halloween searching for someone small and defenseless.
There are things in the night that would love to get their bony hands on a boy like you.
He'll try to convince you that he's harmless.
I could help you.
He'll tell you that he's your friend.
I am not going to hurt you.
But if you see him once,
You're not who you say you are.
you're guaranteed to see him again.
Why are you following me?
And again.
Stay away from me.
And again.
Wait! Help! Help!
13 Days of Halloween, Devil's Night. Season 3 of the horror fiction podcast presented in immersive 3D audio. Starring Carter Rockwood.
I don't know you, mister. I don't want to know you.
And Clancy Brown.
Lots of dangerous things have been let loose tonight. I am not the only one.
Listen to 13 Days of Halloween on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What if I told you a sports story where what happens on the field is the least interesting part of the tale?
But I think there's a long tradition of these kind of stories, especially these kinds of sports stories. Have the license to follow it all the way down to the bottom.
This is The Cost of These Dreams, a podcast about sports stories from Wright Thompson. There's a story about a professional golfer who's chasing one dream just to fill the hole left by another.
If the person is that visible and yet they don't feel seen, what's going on?
You'll hear a story about a college football team that's really about the legacy of the Civil War.
We do it to them and they do it to themselves without really understanding exactly what it is they're doing.
And a grumpy old man who got everything he ever wanted at too young an age.
The best stories are universal. They should be about everybody.
Listen to The Cost of These Dreams on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Because you have had these, starts and stops within the context of the band, and even like I remember distinctly, like you were talking about previously, where you were popping on stage with All. Like I remember a show at the Roxy where I saw All, and you came and sang 3 or 4 songs at the end. Because you've had that aspect of seeing these different eras. Was there a time that felt more like you were surprised when you did come back and return, where it was just like, I know every time was probably like, whoa, this is wild. I can't believe this is happening. Was there a time it was more, I guess, stark in contrast as far as either the crowd reactions or just the way that people were, perceiving and holding up Descendents towards you?
I guess it probably was the 2011 time, because when we came back in 96, that was kind of like that made a little bit more sense in terms of, these bands. The pop punk thing had gotten pretty big, Green Day, Offspring, Rancid, and we were coming back and saying, hey, remember us, and so yeah, cool, join the party. So that was cool in 96, but to do it in 2011 was completely, and that was then, like I said, at least 8 years. It was 8 years before our last show, but it was actually probably more like 15 years since we toured at all. And so 15 years after any major tour to come back in 2011 was kind of like, I just had no idea what to expect. And that pretty much blew my mind, to have that happen.
Right. Yeah. There's just being able to be like, listen, there's no reason you should care about us, but like, still here? Okay.
Still here. And we were subbing at that point, we were subbing in for Devo. So I was like, oh man, how can we sub in for Devo? Come on. So it was kind of a dream come true for me. Like, yeah, we're subbing in for Devo. But we even played Uncontrollable Urge is one of our songs. We're like, this is right. On Devo. I think Bob One had broken his arm or something like that, and they couldn't play. So we played Uncontrollable Urge in their honor. But it was just like, it was like coming back after that long and having it be this just humongous, festival show, and just, it was pretty special. And I think that's what's kind of, like I said, that's kind of fueled the kind of, I think, permanence of what we're doing now. It's just like, we should just all die on stage at this point. Let's just keep playing and we'll just all kind of croak on stage, or just kind of like, someone's going to have an arm fall off and then we'll just have to quit. But there's no reason to kind of make some kind of conscious decision of, oh, we're not going to do this anymore because we don't want to. It's pretty clear we want to.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like there's unless you are physically unable to perform your duties, you are here. Right.
That's right.
And kind of tangential to that, but I think interesting is the idea, because you guys have existed for so long and you have had all of these random, entry points to your band, kind of like what you were talking about at the very beginning of the conversation. Is there a particular pop culture piece of ephemera that people have found out about you guys from, that you were either surprised or kind of like, oh, that's weird, you heard about us through that? Is there anything that kind of sticks out when I articulate that question to you?
Something that people might have found out about us? Wait.
Yeah, like got introduced to you, via, like you said, whether it was, another band or whether it was like, myself through a random movie that is there anything that kind of sticks out where people have echoed back to you that they've discovered you through a maybe unconventional circumstance?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, there are some kids that like learned about us from their dads or whatever. Like
that's interesting. Yeah.
My dad played your music, and it got me into it, which is a great way to have it happen. It's like, because of course, dad's music's never cool, but if you actually got into us by listening to your dad's music, that's pretty, like, it's almost backwards. It's like almost 180 degrees reversed. So that's kind of cool. But we have had people say, yeah, your dad played you all the time, and then I got into you from that. So that's kind of it speaks to the fact that that we're in that part of our music careers where it's like the grandkids are showing up with their parents. How many generations are going to be there? It's been kind of fun that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you're very right in the fact that not only do kids have to interact with your band if they find out about you, through a quote unquote normal circumstance, whether it's, being delivered a, algorithm playlist on Spotify, but that's an extra hurdle where it's like, oh, my parents think it's cool, so I have to immediately think it's not cool. But then they listen to it further and it's like, oh, actually, this is pretty good. I like it.
Yeah. Like, despite my initial resistance,
exactly.
I got over it and got into you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I thought you guys were just going to be some lame classic rock. And, realistically, like, you guys could easily be, defined as that from a, longevity perspective.
That's cool. I like classic rock too.
Exactly. Well, the last thing I want to hit on was the, like you mentioned previously, where, you have kids and they've obviously watched you, play and kind of grow up pursuing these creative impulses of yours through the band. Do they have that initial reaction of what you do from a band perspective, like, is lame? How does it kind of sit in their heads, or at least what they've said to you in regards to playing in a band?
Well, I guess the timing of the 2011 thing, which is when they were preteen, both my kids preteen, that worked out pretty good. I was getting my daughter into some punk. I had her listen to some Agent Orange, and for a while she's like, yeah, I like that Agent Orange stuff, And so then I played her some of my stuff, and she said, well, aren't you going to play this live sometime? And at this point, it's like 2010. We haven't really gotten back together yet. And it kind of put the seed in my head, like, maybe I need to get the band back together for my kids. It's like, it's like, this is my opportunity. There's a window of opportunity where they will listen to it and be like, yeah, that's pretty cool. As opposed to if I was like, if they were teenagers, they'd probably like, nah, you suck, because teenagers are that way. But so that worked out well, because in the early 20 teens, they were into it. And then I think now they're at the point where they've moved on to other music, but they'll come see me play live and they'll dig it. They'll get a kick out of it now. But they've been through the punk thing and they've moved on to other stuff. And which is great. My son's like a huge hip hop fan, and that's all he ever wants to listen to. My daughter listens to anything under the sun. So, but yeah, I think I kind of played my cards right in terms of allowing them to kind of get into my band and see us play live when they were preteens, still not in that kind of like teenage snotty phase of like everything your parents does sucks basically.
Right.
And I also had the advantage of being able to bring them on stage, and we do the songologistics, where I would bring on stage the ologistics sign that has all the thou shouts on it, and I would get them involved in that. Like, okay, say thou shalt not commit laundry, say thou shalt not commit flatulence or whatever.
Right.
Thou shalt not suppress flatulence. Sorry. And so I got them involved in that, from a pretty young age. And I think my favorite memory there was getting my daughter on stage and having her do the thou shalt, oh great. Now I'm not going to remember. It's thou shalt not partake of decaf. That's the one.
Right.
Thou shalt not partake of decaf. Very important one. I still live that to this day.
Sure.
And he said, thou shalt not partake of death, because she read it wrong. And I just thought, that's brilliant. We should just change it to that, because now we're in our 50s. Yeah. We don't want to partake of death. So yeah.
No, yeah, we are actively pursuing everything we can do against that, because
don't partake of death.
Yeah, simply, yeah, decaf and death, easily two things you shouldn't pursue.
Yeah,
and so the last thing I do promise so how many cups of coffee a day is the general intake now? Do you feel like you've slowed down? Are you accelerating it? Are you at a comfortable level?
It slows down in between tours, as you might expect. But even I have 2 cups of coffee in the morning, my little espresso volumes, and that's good. I don't drink any more than that on any given day. If I'm going to practice, I'm going to have a 3rd cup to practice with, and then when we're on tour, all hell breaks loose, and we probably down about 5-6 cups of coffee before we play. Bill goes crazy. He'll do like 10 shots of espresso.
That's great. I'm also going to guess coffee in some capacity is on your guys' rider.
Oh yeah, fully.
Of course,
yeah, it's got to be like. But like what we do lately is if we're in a bus, like one of those nice tour buses, we bring a coffee maker with us on the bus, and we just kind of abuse that thing in the bus and just get loaded on coffee in the bus before we go on stage. And as Bill says, we kind of have to, because if we don't, the music's just going to suck. We're old enough now where you can look yourself in the mirror and go, the only way I'm playing these songs anymore is if I get tanked up on coffee. That's the only way it's going to happen. So
right, and obviously, as you age and you build up a resistance towards caffeine, like you need to have more in order to get that hit.
Yeah. Yeah, but in between tours, we try to dry out a little bit. In between tours, you dry out and you try to get that sensitivity, but you try to lower that tolerance some, so that when you get back on tour, it still hits you.
Right. Yeah. You drink that, cold brew from a local cool artisan coffee shop, and all of a sudden you feel like you're flying.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Milo, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time. And thanks for putting all of the great music out that you have over the years. It's been great to talk to you.
All right. It's good talking to you.
Wowee. Wasn't Milo just a gem of a human? I knew it was going to be a fun discussion, but after I was over with it, I was just like, wow, I got to talk to a dude who has completely changed my life. And it's so cool to have that. But anyways, thank you again to Carl for hooking us up, connecting those dots. I really appreciate that. And we're going to keep on keeping on. It's not like the show is going to stop next week, take a break. Nope. Episode 501. Here we go. And next week is another legend, and a person that I had spoken to many, many years ago in a different context, an interview when I was working at PETA. Sergio Vega, who is the bassist for Quicksand, also spent many, many years in the Deftones, recently departed them through, basically just some business pleasantries of like, hey, we're not renewing your contract. It's a whole thing. But anyways, Sergio, great conversation. He's a very prolific musician. He also played in Absolution. I mean, God, let's just reflect on the low end that he's putting down. He's legitimately one of the first bassists that I actually recognized as a sort of unique individual. It was always previously just like, oh yeah, there's a bassist. Like that's just, maybe an easier version of the guitar. But anyways, that's who we have on the show next week. And thank you again I know like 5 of you are listening to this, but I really appreciate your support because this podcast, like I said, has changed my life in the best way possible. So thank you very much. And until next week, please be safe, everybody.
UFOs, psychic powers, chemtrails. To learn about mysterious events, you listen to the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know podcast. And here's where it gets crazy. Now you can read all about your favorite conspiracy theories in the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know book from the creators of the podcast. Dive into a smart, witty explanation of the unexplainable, packed with amazing illustrations. Available now. Order today at stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com or wherever you buy your books.
Hey, I'm Dua Lipa, and I'm thrilled to be back for the second season of my podcast, Dua Lipa at Your Service. Alongside me and my guests' lists and recommendations, the show features conversations with some of my biggest inspirations, working across entertainment, politics, activism, and much, much more. I've been hard at work getting season 2 ready for you all summer long, so please tune in and join me on this very special adventure. Listen to Dua Lipa at Your Service on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you crime curious? iHeart Podcasts has gathered the best true crime all in one podcast feed. iHeart True Crime Plus. It's packed with podcasts about unsolved murders, missing persons, organized crime, and more. So there's always something good to binge and share. iHeart True Crime Plus subscribers also enjoy ad-free listening, early access to select episodes, and exclusive bonus content. Subscribe to iHeart True Crime Plus today, exclusively on Apple Podcasts.